Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So we'll continue along the topic of energy versus sluggishness. And not quite sure all that Ajahn Karuṇadhammo might have gone into sort of introducing it yesterday, but I thought I'd just make a few brief comments and read a brief passage from one of Bhikkhu Bodhi's writings, just to sort of as an intro to energy. And that just noting that viriya, energy, as part of the practice as a skillful quality that one needs to develop, is very much associated, very closely associated, almost in some ways synonymously with right effort, samma, vāyāma, as one of the Noble Eightfold Path. So they're very closely entwined. And Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, The Noble Eightfold Path, has, of course, a complete chapter on right effort, which in itself is worthy of reading out. But I think we decided to concentrate on other things for these 4 days. So it's certainly, if you haven't read that, looking for it. It doesn't go into excruciating detail on right effort, but a good amount, enough to give a person an idea of what's involved with those four right efforts. But he also has a couple of paragraphs where he relates energy, or viriya, to right effort, which I thought I'd read out. Energy, viriya, the mental factor behind right effort, can appear in either wholesome or unwholesome forms. The same factor fuels desire, aggression, violence, and ambition on the one hand, and generosity, self-discipline, kindness, concentration, and understanding on the other. The exertion involved in right effort is a wholesome form of energy, but it is something more specific, namely the energy in wholesome states of consciousness directed to liberation from suffering. This last qualifying phrase is especially important. For wholesome energy to become a contributor to the path, it has to be guided by right view and right intention, and to work in association with the other path factors. Otherwise, as the energy in ordinary wholesome states of mind, it merely engenders an accumulation of merit that ripens within the round of birth and death. It does not issue in liberation from the round. Time and again, the Buddha has stressed the need for effort, for diligence, exertion, and unflagging perseverance. The reason why effort is so crucial is that each person has to work out his or her own deliverance. The Buddha does what he can by pointing out the path to liberation. The rest involves putting the path into practice, a task that demands energy. This energy is to be applied to the cultivation of the mind, which forms the focus of the entire path. The starting point is the defiled mind, afflicted and deluded. The goal is the liberated mind, purified and illuminated by wisdom. What comes in between is the unremitting effort to transform the defiled mind into the liberated mind. The work of self-cultivation is not easy. There is no one who can do it for us but ourselves. But it is not impossible. The Buddha himself and his accomplished disciples provided the living proof that the task is not beyond our reach. They assure us, too, that anyone who follows the path can accomplish the same goal. But what is needed is effort, the work of practice taken up with the determination, I shall not give up my efforts until I have attained whatever is attainable by perseverance, energy, and endeavor. And then he goes on to discuss the 4 right efforts in more detail. So I just had a couple of readings from suttas that are along those lines. Some related to energy, striving, and some a little bit more broadly into some aspects of the right efforts too. So the first one I thought I'd read out is from the Anguttara Nikaya, the Numerical Discourses. And it's in the Book of the Sevens, and it's number 61 in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, page 1059. And it's one that many people are familiar with regarding Moggallāna, Mahā Moggallāna, and his issue with dozing a bit, a little bit of sleepiness going on here. And actually Bhikkhu Bodhi has titled this one, Dozing. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Bhagas at Sungsumaragira in the deer park at Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Grove. Now on that occasion, the Venerable Mahā Moggallāna was sitting and dozing at Kalawalamuttagama among the Magadhans. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, the Blessed One saw the Venerable Mahā Moggallāna sitting and dozing. Then, just as a strong man might extend his drawn-in arm or draw in his extended arm, the Blessed One disappeared from the deer park at Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Grove and reappeared before the Venerable Mahā Moggallāna. The Blessed One sat down on the seat that was prepared for him and said, "Are you dozing, Moggallāna? Are you dozing, Moggallāna?" And for those of you who may have read the Polytext Society version in its older form of English, a favorite of Ajahn Ammaro's to quote is his aunt I.B. Horner's translation of that phrase is, "Nottest thou, Moggallāna?" So, and then Moggallāna answers, "Yes, Bhante. Therefore, Moggallāna, you should not attend to or cultivate the object that you are attending to when you become drowsy. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should ponder, examine, and mentally inspect the Dhamma as you have heard it and learned it. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should recite in detail the Dhamma as you have heard it and learned it. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should pull both ears and rub your limbs with your hands. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should get up from your seat, rub your eyes with water, survey all the corridors, and look up at the constellations and stars. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should attend to the perception of light. You should undertake the perception of day, thus, as by day, so at night, as at night, so by day. Thus, with a mind that is open and uncovered, you should develop a mind imbued with luminosity. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should undertake the exercise of walking back and perceiving what is behind you and what is in front, with your sense faculties drawn in and your mind collected. By such means, it is possible that your drowsiness will be abandoned. But if you cannot abandon your drowsiness in such a way, you should lie down on the right side in the lion's posture, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and clearly comprehending, after noting in your mind the idea of rising. When you awaken, you should get up quickly, thinking, "I will not be intent on the pleasure of rest, the pleasure of sloth, the pleasure of sleep." It is in this way, Moggallāna, that you should train yourself. So that's the first section of the sutta, directly addressing ways to deal with drowsiness. And then he broadens the teaching to a more general teaching that seems to, I think, involve many aspects of right effort. Therefore, Moggallāna, you should train yourself thus. We will not approach families for alms with heads swollen with pride. It is in this way, Moggallāna, that you should train yourself. It may be, Moggallāna, that a bhikkhu approaches families with a head swollen with pride. Now there are chores to be done in the families, and for this reason, when a bhikkhu turns up, people may not pay attention to him. In such case, the bhikkhu might think, who has turned this family against me? It seems these people have now become indifferent towards me. In this way, through lack of gain, one feels humiliated. When feeling humiliated, one becomes restless. When one is restless, one loses one's restraint. The mind of one without restraint is far from concentration. Therefore, Moggallāna, you should train yourself thus. We will not engage in contentious talk. It is in this way that you should train yourself. When there is contentious talk, an excess of words can be expected. When there is an excess of words, one becomes restless. When one is restless, one loses one's restraint. The mind of one without restraint is far from concentration. Moggallāna, I do not praise bonding with everyone whatsoever, nor do I praise bonding with no one at all. I do not praise bonding with householders and monastics, but I do praise bonding with quiet and noiseless lodgings far from the flurry of people, remote from human habitation, and suitable for seclusion. When this was said, the Venerable Mahā Moggallāna said to the Blessed One, Briefly, Bhante, how is a bhikkhu liberated in the extinction of craving, best among devas and humans, one who has reached the ultimate conclusion, one ultimate security from bondage, lived the ultimate spiritual life and gained the ultimate consummation? Here, Moggallāna, a bhikkhu has heard, quote, nothing is worth holding to. When a bhikkhu has heard nothing is worth holding to, he directly knows all things. Having directly known all things, he fully understands all things. Having fully understood all things, whatever feeling he feels, whether pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, he dwells contemplating impermanence in those feelings, contemplating fading away in those feelings, contemplating cessation in those feelings, contemplating relinquishment in those feelings. As he dwells contemplating impermanence, fading away, cessation, relinquishment in those feelings, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Being unagitated, he personally attains nibbana. He understands. Destroyed is birth, the spiritual life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming back to any state of being. Briefly, Moggallāna, it is in this way that a bhikkhu is best among devas and humans, one who has reached the ultimate conclusion, one ultimate security from bondage, lived the ultimate spiritual life, and gained the ultimate consummation. So, all the way from nodding to full liberation in this sutta. Just a brief comment before I go on to the next sutta. Those factors of attending to attend to abandoning drowsiness are really quite useful. I think that many of us sometimes succumb to going right to number 8 first, lying down and going to sleep. But it's worth trying some of the other ones before succumbing to the recumbent posture. Okay, so we'll move on to the next sutta that I thought, and this is kind of an old classic that people, I think it's just nice to read it out every now and again. in terms of establishing some of the factors related to right effort, both in this one of developing skillful qualities and also abandoning some unwholesome skillful qualities. And it's something that I think most people can relate to as a very common experience. It's from the Majjhima Nikaya number 20, the Vitakkasaṇṭhāna Sutta, the removal of distracting thoughts. I think most of us can relate to having distracting thoughts periodically. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Sāvatī in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir. They replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is pursuing the higher mind, from time to time, he should give attention to 5 signs. What are the 5? Here, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts, connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. When he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove, and extract a coarse peg by means of a fine one, so too, when a bhikkhu gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Take a look at that footnote. From the commentaries, when thoughts of sensual desire arise directed towards living beings, the other sign, the fine peg knocking out the coarse peg, the other sign, or the antidote, is the meditation on asubha. When the thoughts are directed to inanimate things of sensual desire, the other sign is attention to impermanence. When thoughts of hate arise directed towards living beings, the other sign is the meditation on loving kindness. When they are directed to inanimate things, the other sign is attention to the elements. The remedy for thoughts connected with delusion is living under a teacher, studying the Dhamma, inquiring into its meaning, listening to the Dhamma, and inquiring into causes. So the commentaries offer some concrete suggestions as to wholesome states that counteract the unwholesome state being talked about. So that's the first method. 2, if, while he is giving attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts thus. These thoughts are unwholesome, they are reprehensible, they result in suffering. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his or her neck, so too, when a bhikkhu examines the danger in those thoughts, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. 3, if while he is examining the danger in those thoughts, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms that had come within range of sight would either shut his eyes or look away, so too when a bhikkhu tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. 4. If, while he is trying to forget those thoughts and is not giving attention to them, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should give attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. When he gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness and concentrated. Just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And he would walk slowly. Then he might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? And he would stand. Then he might consider, why am I standing? What if I sit? And he would sit. Then he might consider, why am I sitting? What if I lie down? And he would lie down. By doing so, he would substitute for each grosser posture one that was subtler. So too, when a bhikkhu gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, the mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. 5. If, while he is giving attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. When, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, then any evil, unwholesome unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him, so too, when, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, a bhikkhu beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. Bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is giving attention to some sign and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, any such evil, unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him and subside. And with the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, when he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, when he gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, when, with his teeth clenched and his tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, any such evil, unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him, and his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. This bhikkhu is then called a master of the courses of thought. This bhikkhu is then called a master of the courses of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. He has severed craving, flung off the fetters, and with the complete penetration of conceit, he has made an end of suffering. This is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words.
Reminds me of somebody asked, I think it might have been Bhikkhu or one of these disciples of Ajahn Mun, like, what's the difference between the unenlightened mind and the mind when it's well-trained or enlightened. And he says, well, before, or they're asking about his mind, what's the difference from before and now? He said, before it didn't do what I wanted it to do, now it does what I want it to do.
Instead of being under its control. Yeah. The unwieldy mind. Yeah, it's always both of those I think are classics. This is the evening of classics. Yeah, particularly this one, sometimes people get a little bit, maybe, I think most people can sort of understand the first three. The fourth one of giving attention to the stilling, the thought formation of thoughts, of those thoughts, is sometimes a bit confusing. And the commentaries sort of give kind of one explanation of what that might be, and other people have different ideas, and all of them seem to be, legitimate in some way in my mind. But like the commentaries talk about that meaning. I think, if I remember right, I didn't go back to look at the footnotes, but kind of just tracing back a thought pattern, so that if you have a kind of a recurring thought going on, to try and remember what the thought was before that, and the thought before that, and the thought before that, until you get back to either the beginning or you just get too tired and let it go, give it up. That's one explanation. Another one is that you're actually just kind of talking yourself and giving yourself encouragement, just like the example of, why am I walking fast? Why don't I walk slow? Why am I walking slow? Why don't I sit down? Kind of just looking at the energetics of it and, examining and just consciously trying to slow the thinking process down until it settles, and kind of giving yourself a soothing talk to release the energy. And another possibility, one that makes sense to me as well, is going kind of below the words, seeing that the words are kind of a surface active manifestation of a certain mind state, whether it's greed, hatred, or delusion, and the words are just picking up on a theme or on a concept to elaborate that energy on, and kind of letting go of the actual story and going down to a deeper level of the actual feeling of the hindrance or the motivating defiled mind state underneath it, and attending to it on that kind of affective level, body contemplation, that kind of thing, feeling it in the body and letting it soothe, calm down. So it seems like there's different ways that people interpret that. And then kind of that last one, sometimes people get a bit like, isn't that crushing mind with mind? Isn't that a bit violent? Or like overzealous? Some people might think, particularly with the simile of a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him. Doesn't sound very compassionate. But I think the idea behind it is, the Bhikkhu, the Buddha used pretty strong similes to drive his points home. And this is sort of like the last resort, that particularly if something is really, a potentially dangerous thought that you're having, when they come up with people sometimes, it's like violent thoughts or harmful thoughts, that if everything else kind of fails, you need to take some action so that you don't move into unskillful action in speech or in bodily action. And sometimes you just basically have, when something is so persistent, or even if it's not necessarily going to lead to harm or violence or anything like that, but it's just so strong and so persistent, and it just doesn't seem to want to settle down, to really look at it very squarely and just say no, nope, go away. This is not appropriate to dwell in. Kind of like you have to take emergency action if a young kid is running out into the middle of the street and about to get hit by a car. You don't try and quietly coax him back. You run out into the street, you grab the kid, and you pull him out of the road, even if it hurts him a little bit or hurts yourself. It's better than getting run over. So that kind of energy. occasionally is needed.
Yeah, in terms of like the fifth type of thought where it really needs to be stamped out immediately is like if you're starting to convince yourself that you should commit an offense if you're a monk or something like that. Yeah. Like where if you follow it through, it's going to be a great danger. Something like that comes to mind.
And in the Vinaya, they even use that same phrase. It's like when a bhikkhu has crushed his restraint or crushed his indecision and decides to act. That's when the offense will happen.
And possible interpretation of the fourth one too, where giving attention to stilling the thought formation. The way I kind of interpret that is like also seeing that thoughts are time-based and they're actually formed over time. So trying to get into like momentary cutting the thought up and seeing that each section of it makes no sense. It's just dependent on the whole thing being formed. Mm-hmm. That's another possible.
Yeah. Sounds like a good approach too.
In Ajahn Jeff's translation of the fifth one is interesting. He has crushing one's, beat down, constrain, and crush one's mind with one's awareness. I think the Pali uses two different terms, and Bhikkhu Bodhi translates both terms as mind, and Ajahn Jeff consistently translates them differently. But that's an interesting perspective, because awareness seems broader than mind. It's a greater, mind seems more caught in thoughts. Awareness is broader.
It's like overpowering the thoughts with
awareness, which is a different take than crushing mind with mind.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Have any Ajahns tried the crushing teeth with the roof of the tongue?
For me, I don't. The actual physical thing I haven't tried before. Usually, I'm able to generate a few sharp words, of warning, enough to get me off. But I've not tried the physical. Have you tried the physical? Have you actually pressed the roof?
Well, I do that one more as a visualization. Like if there's a really nagging, unwholesome proliferation, I tend to imagine like drawing a circle around it and like pushing it down, or like doing it like visually.
Right.
But that's because I'm a very
visual person. Yeah. I think my tendencies tend to be more verbal, so I can say, "No, don't go there. Just just do something else." It's like, just don't go there, Karuṇadhammo.
I've also visualized punching myself in the face, but that's more like self-aversion. It's not part of the meditation. It's not skillful.
Right.
It's skillful to do that.
That's where you need the strong man to restrain yourself.
That's where you need to stop punching yourself in the face.
In a similar vein to your imagery of the kid running out in the street, one teacher sort of said that fifth option is an emergency brake in your car. Where if you use the e-brake all the time, you're never you can't go anywhere using an e-brake. But when you're about to swerve off the road, that's when you need it.
Right. Yeah. Emergency release. Yeah, as far as the drowsiness one goes, just one other thought that came to mind while I was reading this too is that Ajahn Sucitto had kind of another method that I heard him talk about a long time ago when I was at Chithurst that I've actually found useful in terms of helping to freshen up a drowsy mind, and that's to actually this combination of visual and also just actually really moving the energy in through the head, because a lot of times, at least the experience of drowsiness for me, and I think for others, is this kind of foggy, dreamy kind of series of images or vague, random, chaotic thinking kinds of things, and it has a feeling of kind of stuffiness, stagnation, and visualizing like really fresh, clean air energy coming into and through the head and clearing out the space, and using your breath energy to help kind of flush out the stagnation in the head, behind the eyes, and through the body can be a real energizing kind of experience for some people.
I've also heard teachers, students asking about drowsiness, recommending them look at viriya.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a cause for, the negative mind or the resistant mind can lead to drowsiness.
Ajahn Karuṇadhammo made the point a few vignettes ago that the nada sound is maybe the auditory equivalent of the perception of light. Just this sort of ever-present, and that it's effective against drowsiness, and I certainly found that to be true. And also, as to the sort of slowing down things, I really like Long Course made of advice about, like, if you're stuck in one train of thought, just saying it really slowly. Like, if that guy stopped chewing so loudly, I would be happy forever. And just, like, seeing that it's absurd.
You have to get creative too, like Ajahn Pasano, one of my favorite methods he talks about for quelling these kinds of thoughts is seeing your different thought proliferations as different types of dogs. And like naming them as well. He said even getting really into it, like, these different types of dogs.
Different types of dogs. The little yappy chihuahua.
Yeah, and the kind of depressed, the depressed Great Dane or something.
Right. That's good. You have to get creative sometimes.
Make it interesting.
Yeah, make it interesting.